Welcome to Haters TV. I am here with Kieran Gill, Chelsea reporter for the Daily Mail. Kieran, how are you?
I'm alright, how are you?
Yeah, good. We have just been digesting the news that broke today that Liam Rosenior is officially the new Chelsea manager. First of all, what's your take on it?
Well, after Maresca left, we found out pretty early on that Liam Rosenior was going to be a leading candidate. We sort of heard different names about the other candidates, but never really had concrete information of them. We reported interest in Andoni Iraola, but all the way through, from start to finish, I think Rosenior was a leading candidate, and he's now won.
On the candidates, because from a lot of the reports it seemed that it was a very small pool.
Yeah.
In fact, not many other names were even mentioned, especially when it started getting to interview stage. According to your information, how big do you think the pool was? Who were the other names that were seriously considered?
So the way it was put to me was less than a handful, so I'm assuming 4. And the way Chelsea like to work is they sort of have those 4, then they whittle it down to 3 to 2 to the winner. And I heard Iraola's name because he's admired, the Bournemouth manager. The Porto manager was also linked, but I didn't hear that name myself. But all the way through, I kept hearing Rosenior's name. So I think from the very beginning, because he's impressed so much with what he's done at Strasbourg, he's familiar with Blueco. A lot of the players here already know him. Delap, Andre Santos, Emega, who's coming in the summer. So that familiarity helped, and I imagine it helped in the interview process as well, because when Liam Rosenior was a player at Hull, I think it was, he used to work a lot with a young analyst called Lawrence Stewart, who is now co-sporting director at Chelsea. And then somewhere else he got to know Paul Winstanley and Sam Jewell, who were also on the leadership team. So there's a lot of familiarity with Rosenior. So I'm not surprised Chelsea went with him in the end. That's not to say it's nepotism. I don't think it's a bad thing for Rosenior to come in to Chelsea and already be quite well connected. It might help him.
Do you think, obviously Blueco, we know that they are the ownership of both Strasbourg and Chelsea, and that is why they knew him so well. Do you think on merit he would have got this job if he wasn't part of the Blueco model?
I think it probably, it'll have helped that he's part of the Blueco model, because he knows how it works, and Chelsea's approach is very different to everywhere else. Last season Chelsea had the youngest lineups in Premier League history. There was nobody had ever fielded such young 11s, but I think Chelsea's average age was about 24 years old last season. Strasbourg's average age last season was 21 years. So they weren't just younger, they were younger by a massive margin. Yeah. Strasbourg had the youngest average age lineups last season out of every team in Europe's elite leagues.
Really?
So Rosenior has that experience of managing young players, and really the players at Strasbourg are even younger than at Chelsea. So I think, given what he's worked with Rosenior, I think he was always going to be a front runner for Chelsea.
We know that a large reason why Maresca left was fallings out behind the scenes. He felt a bit micromanaged and not fully in control. Do you think that someone like Rosenior knows exactly what he's stepping into and will be okay with having things taken out of his control?
Yeah, I mean, when Chelsea have announced him this morning, they've called him head coach, and that's what he is. He's not going to come in here and do a Ruben Amorim and say, I'm manager, I'm not head coach. I think he's going to come and fit into the system, I imagine that, and he's an articulate guy. He's a clever guy. We've all, ever since we knew he was a candidate, we've all started reading back interviews and footage of him on being a pundit. So we know he's a clever guy, and he knows exactly what he's walking into, I imagine.
And you mentioned the interviews that are out there, Sky Sports, The Guardian. He's done a lot of that sort of thing, and he seems a really good communicator. Right now, I think it's fair to say a lot of fans aren't behind the appointment. Do you think that with what he's done as a manager and the way he can communicate, he'll be able to get a lot of them on side?
Yeah, one thing I was told yesterday was that one thing he really wants to help get across is in press conferences he wants to be clear and concise, and he wants to explain exactly tactically why he makes certain decisions, which is good. Then the supporters can understand why he's making certain calls, which we haven't always had, and I think fans appreciate that. And I think he's a good communicator in ROSENIOR. He's English, so he can come in and explain exactly what he's doing. I mean, this morning he did his press conference with Strasbourg. He didn't have to do that, and from what I hear, ROSENIOR pushed to do that himself, because he wanted to go over there and he wanted to explain exactly why he was leaving Strasbourg. I'm not sure it's ever happened before, a manager doing a farewell presser before he's even signed his contract with his next club. So I think that told us that ROSENIOR's a nice guy, and now he has to prove his coaching credentials to Chelsea fans. But when he's speaking through the media at his presses, I'm told he really wants to try and explain his tactics and why he makes certain decisions.
And it's interesting timing that he's joining Chelsea. Obviously, still very much the start of the January transfer window. We know as well with Maresca, some things like he wanted a centre-back replacement for Colwill. That never happened. Now with the squad the way that it currently is, ROSENIOR just coming in, there's still over 20 days left of the January transfer window. Do you think Chelsea could look to be doing any business?
I haven't heard that Chelsea are going to change their approach to this January window, and that approach was we're not planning on making it a big one. They'll be reactive. They'll be on alert for opportunities, but they're not going into it thinking, right, we need to get that massive midfielder now, we need to get that striker or whatever. From what I hear, then it's going to be a quiet one unless they're forced into making decisions. And ROSENIOR is going to come in, and he won't just be gifted players. They will ask his opinion. Maresca was asked his opinion. Garnacho, for example, they broached that by Maresca, and he agreed it was going to be a good signing. But we do know Maresca probably would have liked a bit more power or a bit more say. I remember once rocking up a bit early for a presser, and Maresca was getting out of his car with his young son. So we had a brief chat, and I said, "Oh, is this your new signing?" He's just a young lad. He was already wearing a Chelsea tracksuit. And Maresca said, "Yeah, it's the centre back I wanted." so he's clearly he did want a centre back. He didn't get a centre back, and it's just the way it goes at Chelsea. A manager doesn't have complete authority.
And in terms of outgoings in January, have you got any update on Raheem Sterling, Disasi, anyone else who could be either loaned out or sold?
Ideally they'd like to get rid of, maybe that's not too kind of a way to put it, but they'd like to help Disasi and Sterling move on, because they're not playing for the first team. They need to go elsewhere, ideally. Tyreek George, I can see leaving this month. Shin Mueka maybe to go and get some senior minutes. But I haven't heard any of those killer names that they're trying to get rid of, because Chelsea are fairly happy with their squad. From what I hear, they think it's good enough to get top 4, top 5 finish for that Champions League football. So they're not planning on making major changes in this January, but there are a few players who they could do with getting off the books.
And one player who has obviously been out of the radar for a long time, Mykhailo Mudryk. I think a lot of Chelsea fans are confused what is happening with him. Have you heard anything recently? Can you give any update on what's happened?
It's so hard to report on Mudryk because I've had to write on him a few times. It's such a lengthy case, and it's just one that's just surrounded by silence and mystery, because the FA, no matter how much you ask them, won't give you an update. They can't give you an update because there's so many legal complications to it. I have no idea when he's coming back, if and when.
And we know that with all this managerial change and a lot of focus from media and fans has been on the owners and the sporting directors. Now there's a protest planned for the 17th of January against Brentford. And we should say that this isn't a protest against Liam Rosenior, it's against Bedad Iqbali and the sporting directors. Do you think that fans are starting to get a bit fed up with this model?
I mean, when you're reading on social media, it seems that way. And they have every right to voice their opinion, as do we as newspaper columnists. We can voice our opinions as well. And I'm sure it'll be taken note. I'll be at that game, so it'll be interesting to see how big it is, because I was at the last protest. I can't remember what game that was before, but I was there, and that did gain some traction. So it'll be interesting to see how that one goes and whether anything comes of it.
Since this new ownership have taken over, they've obviously got rid of Tuchel, brought in Potter, then Pochettino, then Enzo Maresca, now it's Liam Rosenior. It's been a lot of change. It's been 3.5 years now, over that, since the new owners took over. Almost £1.5 billion spent. How much rests on Liam Rosenior? Not obviously all the pressure on him, but on the appointment of him for the owners. How big a decision is this?
Yeah, I mean, when they appointed Enzo Maresca, he signed a 5-year deal plus the option of an extra year. I think there's a fair few within Chelsea who would say that was a successful appointment, because they got into the Champions League, they won the Conference League, they won the Club World Cup, and for the next 3 or 4 years they're going to be playing with a badge on their shirts that tells everyone we're the world champions. So I think for that first season at least, Maresca was good for Chelsea and Chelsea were good for Maresca. So I don't think that was a disaster of an appointment. Liam Rosenior's coming in, and they'll hope it goes as well, but that he gets to stay for even longer, because I know they've announced it as 2032, so that's 6.5 years.
Yeah.
But from what I've been told, it's 5.5 years, but with a year option. And they'll hope he does as well, if not better, and because they want that stability. That's why they're giving out these longer contracts than the ones that they gave to Pochettino, for example, because they want that stability. They want the team to grow together. It's a young side, and now they've got a young manager. They want that sustained success.
Obviously those long contracts, final question, we know that those long contracts make sense for the players financially, but from a manager perspective, for them giving them contracts, we know that obviously Maresca got nowhere near completing his full length of the deal. Would that not put them off giving a similar length of deal to Rosenior? How come it's such a long contract?
I think it's probably a show of faith as well in him. Like I said before, he's so familiar to a lot of people here, including the hierarchy. He already knows Lawrence Stewart, he already knows Paul Winstanley and Sam Jewell. He's worked with these guys previously. I think they have good faith in him. They want to show that. They've given him a contract that's even longer than Maresca's by half a year, and they'll hope he takes that and thrives.
Thanks a lot, Kieran.
No problem. Thanks.